Up next on Forward Focus, we are joined by Miss Anna Harding, who is the Senior Manager of Accountability, and she's going to help us understand the AACPS Strategic Plan Scorecard. Hello, and welcome to Forward Focus, an AACPS program where we focus on our work to create a school system where everyone can belong, grow, and succeed. I'm Shannon Pugh, the Director of Strategic Initiatives. Joining us today is the Senior Manager for Accountability, Mrs. Anna Harding. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, so happy to be with you.
All right, so you're here today to talk about the Strategic Plan Scorecard, but before we get to that, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey
Absolutely.
to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I am homegrown. I am a proud graduate of Arundel High School, where you can't hide that Wildcat pride. After that experience, I went on to be a University of Maryland Terp and then joined Annapolis High School as a math teacher and did several other roles there, like department chair and interdisciplinary team leader, and got a lot of wonderful experience being part of the AHI crew. And then became a member of the Knights Nation as an assistant principal at North County High School. And because of my slight obsession or fascination with data, I was kind of recruited to be a part of the instructional data division, where I've spent the last several years as a senior manager of accountability.
Awesome. So it's always so great to hear when we have one of our own graduates.
Yep.
And the great work
that
you have done in your career. So let's start with the absolute basics. So what is a strategic plan, and do all districts have them?
Yeah, so a strategic plan is a formal document that kind of outlines what a organization's mission is. And so for school districts, it's a best practice. It really serves as the roadmap to kind of guide decision-making, resource allocation, as well as the initiatives aimed at really trying to improve student outcomes as well as organizational effectiveness. And so these plans typically cover a multi-year period. In our case, that'll be 5 years. And they were developed collaboratively with several stakeholders, and so I was privileged to be a part of that group over the last year to see all sorts of representation from around the community as a neat experience, as well as the perspectives. And so with that team, we created the strategic plan because it's just a best practice for managing those resources that are out there, as well as trying to really tackle the challenges head on and strategically. And so the state and the federal accountability systems are important, but we locally want to have our own set of, goals or initiatives that align to those, but really help narrow in our work to kind of shift the needle over time. So we've always had a strategic plan. This is a no-brainer, but this is kind of a new and exciting one, and we're excited to see it kind of brought to fruition.
Awesome. And you already mentioned the inclusion of ESSA and Blueprint as part of our strategic plan. We know that Dr. Bedell, that was very much intentional on his part. He did not want to have all these separate things out there to put them together. So can you start talking, you mentioned ESSA. Help us understand, what is ESSA and why was it important to align the strategic plan to ESSA?
Yeah, so alignment, as you know, is kind of a no-brainer. It feels very disparate if you're going in a million different directions. And so when we put this plan together, we really used several of the accountability systems that were already in place, ESSA being one of them. So ESSA is an accountability system that is intended to help states be aligned to the federal guidelines. And so we have a state consolidated plan that we have initiated to be in compliance with that. And so it's a federal law that was passed in 2015 that replaced the No Child Left Behind Act. And so as part of that, it emphasizes kind of state and local flexibility in terms of maintaining compliance with the federal oversight that's out there. There's a lot of different initiatives or kind of aspects of ESSA, including things that are not just test scores, which is often what people associate with No Child Left Behind. You'll see things like reducing absenteeism or school climate and how teachers and students feel in the building. We also have things like graduation rate, kind of like, what every school system holds themselves accountable to. But ESSA is kind of the conglomerate of all of those things together. And so when we built the strategic plan, we were doing a lot of our goals and initiatives to be aligned to those things so that people were, one, consistently having the same expectations
Mm-hmm.
for themselves as a school leader and those that are in the schoolhouse, as well as just even using the same definition.
Yeah.
So, something like attendance, you can look at the percent of kids not chronic or attendance rate. Those are two different calculations. We wanted to have the same one across all of the systems.
So ESSA is federal, and then Blueprint is state,
Yeah,
right?
you got it. So Blueprint requires specific funding that is aligned to strategies and academic achievement success for all students. So it's important to understand, though, that not every single metric that's in our strategic plan directly aligns to one or the other. Where we could, we absolutely did. But there's some of these definitions that are kind of evolving as these initiatives are being rolled out, and we didn't want to kind of constrain ourselves to just one. And so we use kind of guiding principles that were streamlined across all of them, but the strategies are really the ones that we indicated in the Blueprint implementation plan is also what you're going to see in the strategic plan moving forward.
Can you give us an example of how we would use one of the Blueprint requirements or expectations as a strategy?
Yeah, sure. So Blueprint has several pillars, as you may know, and one of them is expanding pre-K or career and technical education. So our strategic plan has kind of aspects of each of those, and so when we're trying to get students ready for kindergarten, that expansion of pre-K that you'll see in Blueprint is definitely going to help us achieve the goal or indicator that's in the Scorecard strategic plan as well.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump in. So for our audience, our strategic plan has 5 priorities. Within each priority, there are 3 goals, right?
You got it.
And so for each goal, we have one or more metric that we will use to monitor our progress and share that progress with our community. And so let's go ahead and jump into priority 1. Which is academic achievement. And our first goal has to do with having our students read on grade level by the end of grade 2. So take it away. How are we measuring that?
Yeah. So we have elected to use DIBBLS, and DIBBLS stands for the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy. And fun fact, I didn't know this until I got in this role, but it's actually called a battery. So it's a set of several smaller assessments. And so each of those assessments kind of help teachers understand like where they need to focus on. But the composite score of all of those smaller assessments really tells us the readiness of students in terms of their reading level. And so it's scientifically validated, and we're actually not only just using it in 2nd grade, we're using it in grades K through 3. But 2nd grade is really a great indicator for students' reading level to know, are they on track moving forward? But as you're going to see later in the scorecard, there's a lot of metrics that we use to kind of indicate students' readiness or proficiency. But this one felt important to us because we want to get them ready by the end of grade 2 so that when they enter grade 3, they are ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. And I like the fact that we've used a assessment data point that we already give. We're not creating something new for our students or our teachers to navigate through. This is something that they're familiar with, something that is certainly valid across the United States. So let's look at the second goal. Underneath priority 1, and that is increase the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standards on meeting or exceeding proficiency on standards in the core content areas. So can you talk us through that one?
Yeah, so this is one of those ones that's really nicely aligned to ESSA. This is in the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. The MCAP is kind of a larger umbrella for several assessments, and inside the MCAP program there are 4 subjects that are assessed in addition to others, kind of math, English, and science and social studies. And so the state has kind of indicated what proficiency is for each of those areas. You'll see students in grades 3 through 8 for math and reading be assessed there, and then in grades 5 and 8 for science, as well as one time in high school. And then for social studies, it's just grade 8 and one time in high school. So we're going to report out on all of those because those are kind of like the big finish line moments for us as we kind of assess like how are we educating our students, and are they able to attain the things that we are trying to deliver. And so that score is going to show up on our scorecard for all 4 of those areas, and whether or not what % of our kids are proficient in each of them. And again, directly aligned to ESSA or different components of ESSA, as well as Blueprint even uses 3rd grade MCAP to use their, reading assessment and things like that. So there's an alignment in both of those.
Perfect. And so the last goal within priority 1 has to do with progress for our students learning English. Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk us through how we're going to measure that?
Yeah. So our English learners already, as part of the accountability system, take an assessment every year. It's called the Access for ELLs, English Language Learners. And, we know that language isn't just developed in a year. So the state has already indicated specific thresholds in which students have to achieve based off of where they entered.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at the percent of kids that are hitting those thresholds or targets throughout the time that they're with us, and there's 3 different approaches, and we kind of put them all together into one. So it's what percent of our English learners are hitting that proficiency threshold as defined by the state, and again, another measure that's aligned to ESSA, so it makes it nice and consistent for everybody that's doing the work.
All right, so that's priority 1. So priority 2 is called future readiness and transitional preparedness. So what are the goals of this priority and how are we measuring them?
Yeah, so this one's really threefold. We are, again, trying to use metrics that already are in existence and are kind of scientifically backed and backed by the state. And so one of those is whether or not, when students take the kindergarten readiness assessment, whether or not they're deemed ready for kindergarten. We let all students in, right? We want them all ready, but we are using kind of pre-K and things like that to determine that readiness based off of the assessment. We also have secondary readiness for kind of life, like college, career, and the life that comes with it. And so there's a couple different measures that we're using there. And last but not least, it's just the percentage of students that are walking across the stage for graduation at the end.
Awesome. All right, so that brings us to the end of our priority 2. And so we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the other priorities under our strategic plan scorecard. Welcome back. So we are with Miss Anna Harding talking about the AACPS Strategic Plan Scorecard. And so as we left off, we really, for priority 1 and 2, that's our kids, right? That has to do with our academic, achievement, proficiency, and then moving forward for our students, which is of course our priority. But priority 3 is investing in our staff. So talk us through why focusing on the adults in our system is so important. So talk us through priority 3.
Yeah, I think it's kind of unique to, in a school system, have a priority that is really focused on the staff. But when we think about what happens every single day in a schoolhouse, it's the teacher, right, that is kind of guiding what a lesson looks like. And the truth is they need to be experienced and proficient, and they need to feel valued. And I think it's cool that we made that one of the priorities. We know that investing in the staff is critical for kids' academic success, as well as kind of the goals of the future in terms of blueprint and shifting the needle in terms of ESSA as well. So prioritizing staff ensures that schools have really skilled and motivated, well-supported workforce, which is going to eventually drive instructional excellence in the long haul. So we also know that simply retaining staff is critical, right? We want to have experienced teachers, but we also know that when we want to bring staff in, we want them to be representative of our students. And so you'll really see that in terms of this priority. The first one is about retaining the people that we have, but the second goal inside of this is about ensuring that those that are hired reflect the racial and the gender diversity of our students, which I think is important, right? We talk about kids seeing those that look like them, as well as seeing those that have experienced different life experiences. And so I think it's neat. We want to make sure that those two goals aren't working against one another, right? We don't want to lose our whole workforce to hire an incredibly new different proportion. However, we want those that are newly hired to be reflective of the students that we serve every single day.
Awesome. And I know we're going to look at some successes that we have in that category, but let's start with that retaining our instructional and non-instructional staff. So talk us through that one.
Yeah, so when we talk about instructional staff, we're talking about pretty much those that are in the classroom, right? And so you're going to see numbers there that look pretty high, which we're excited about. And we're not expecting to see crazy shifts in numbers, right? When we're looking at things that are greater than 92%, we're excited about the majority of our individuals are staying with us because they are happy and they want to. And those that aren't, right, life goes on, and we want to make sure that they feel that they are successful in their future endeavors. However, those that we hire in place of them are going to, suit the student needs that we have in front of them.
Awesome. So, just to clarify, those numbers are really high, and we're focusing on retaining the staff that, uh, um, for example, we don't count retirements against that number, right?
Correct.
Because we just want them to.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, like when somebody's retired, that's a well-earned benchmark in life, and we want to celebrate that, and we don't want to hold that against us.
Yeah.
Similarly, like if we have teachers that are certified coming in, right? We want to hire certified teachers, and those that are not certified, we either want to work them towards certification, or let them go on and find the things that are most satisfying for them in their future endeavors.
Awesome. You already mentioned a little bit about that diverse staff. Our goal primarily to hire, as we hire new staff, to really make sure that we are reaching out to all possible candidates that are out there to entice them to come to Anne Arundel County. So how are we measuring that piece? What's the difference there between new and then current?
Yeah. So again, in order to not work against that first goal that's in this priority, we are looking at all of our population when we are like looking at the proportion of racial representation and gender. However, what we have control of immediately is who we hired in the previous year. And so you'll see this reported out in the scorecard in terms of all staff as well as those hired in the most recent year. And we're comparing that to the students that were present with us as of September 30th. So it's really kind of a snapshot to go of those that we newly hired. How does that representation in terms of race and gender mirror the student population that we serve?
And I know we're not talking about the strategies, but for example, some of the strategies we are doing to help achieve that is we're recruiting at universities and their schools of education program that we hadn't traditionally recruited from. So get a different group of candidates to even become interested in Anne Arundel County.
And even things like looking for individuals that are not typically in a traditional education path, right? And recruiting them in and going, how can we support them as they take on a new career, which is exciting for everyone.
Perfect. So in priority 3, the last goal there is to increase the number of our teachers who earn national board certification. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory how we're going to measure that, but do you want to talk us through that metric?
Yeah, so being nationally board certified is a high credential. As you know, Dr. Pugh is an MBCT multiple times over in terms of recertification at this point. And they, in order to get that achievement, really undergo a rigorous voluntary process, which requires reflection, best practices, and knowledge in their specific subject and grade level. And while we felt like it was important to report on this for the entire system, we also elected to report on it for schools that are community schools, really serving the students that need us, and making sure that we have highly qualified teachers in those buildings.
Excellent. And that's also part of Blueprint. The Blueprint goal is to increase the number of nationally board certified teachers, and there's even a different salary scale or career ladder for our MBCT. So that's an exciting opportunity for our teachers there. So moving on to priority 4, which is all about the whole child, supporting the whole child. So what's the first goal there?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one to measure, but luckily MSDE every year administers the Maryland School Survey to students in grades 5 through 11. And those individuals, as well as the teachers in the building, answer questions in a variety of domains. And so specifically, they go into these aspects of supporting the whole child. And so we've reported out on their survey scores where a 5.5 or higher is considered favorable. And so we're really working to increase those to that threshold or higher to make sure that students feel like they are emotionally and academically successful and safe in the buildings. And so looking forward to seeing that shift over the time.
Yeah. So that specific goal is ensuring that our families and students are aware of and can access some of our social, emotional, behavioral supports.
Yeah.
And so that's the best way we can measure it right now. And we might be looking at a few other things as we move forward. So the big thing, so chronic absenteeism is a national epidemic at this point. It is a key metric in a lot of things right now. Can you talk us through chronic absenteeism and then what we're doing for that goal within priority?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit that the language on this one is a little odd, right? It's the percentage of students not chronic. And so we're really looking at the percentage of students that are coming to school on a regular basis. Just to provide a little context, the reason we're electing for that language is it's the same language that's in ESSA, going back to that alignment that's earlier. So because of that commitment, we use the same language, and we know that when kids come to school is when they learn, right? And if they're not coming, it's really difficult to pick up the new knowledge and skills that are being taught. A student is considered chronic if they're present less than 90% of the time, less than or equal to 90% of the time. And that definition is agreed upon between nationally recognized organizations, Attendance Works and ESSA and things like that, which we have in several of our buildings.
So I think this is such an important topic that I want to unpack a little bit more about chronic absenteeism. And so we know, as people who were in the classroom for many, many years, that when students miss school, they miss instruction, they miss social opportunities, they miss social emotional supports, maybe counseling, behavioral pieces. They're less likely to be on grade level. They're more likely to experience disciplinary issues. So we have lots of things for those kids who miss more than 10% of the school year. So when we are talking about them, though, and we actually unpack which of our students are chronically absent, are these students who are absent because they're just sick, or what seems to be the that group of our kiddos?
Yeah, so great question. Couple things I want to clarify, right? Chronic absenteeism, it doesn't matter whether it's excused or unexcused, right? When you're not in the building, you're not getting instruction, whether your parent wrote you or not. So that's the first thing to acknowledge. Now, I'll be the first to say that if we have a student who's suffering from a severe medical condition that greatly impacts their ability to attend, we recognize that. We have supports in place for that. And obviously, we want to control what we have the ability to control. Families can only control what they have the ability to control. We don't want kids to come to school who are sick. But what I would tell you is typically, as a parent of two myself, students are not getting a cold or flu that takes them out of school 18 days or more in a year. So if you go to school 180 days in the year, 18 is the threshold, right? When kids are missing more than 18 days of school, it is going to impact their ability to attain what is being taught to them. And so we really want families to make the best decisions that they can, that is the safest for everybody. But when possible, we need those kiddos in schools. And so this is really a joint community stakeholder effort in order to get kids into the buildings. We will work with families with whatever barriers they're experiencing. But the bottom line is, from both an academic point of view as well as a social emotional one, we need kids here. And if they're not sick, they have to be in school for them to be successful.
And so there are lots of different barriers or challenges that some families might have that are leading to some of our students just having to miss more school than ideal. But we do know that within the school building, we do have a lot of social emotional supports. We have services that can help connect families to maybe something that is leading to more absenteeism on the part of their children. So tell us more about why. For now, we're going to goal
beautiful connection here.
Goal C there has to do with really decreasing the student caseload that some of our student service staff members have. So talk us through our goal there.
Yeah, so we expect classroom teachers to deliver their subject matters, right? And in student services, those individuals are really coming around to support students, on a mental health level, as well as, any other services that are kind of aligned to their job descriptions. And so we want families and students to reach out to those when they need support. And in order to do that, there has to be an appropriate ratio between those. And so to your earlier point, when individuals need support, we want there to be the ability and the capacity in terms of time for the student services staff inside the building to support the students in whatever capacity, whether that's connecting them to more resources in-house or out of the building that are offered. And so we know that chronic absenteeism is often linked to unmet mental health needs or things like that. And so we want to try to connect and meet them the best of our ability. Not all students with attendance issues need the same level of intervention. And so you'll see kind of different layers of student support services reported out here. And some of those ratios are incredibly high. I'll be the first to acknowledge that, but that's because not every student needs a PPW. Not every student needs a school psychologist. However, every student has a school counselor, right? And so making sure that those numbers inside the schoolhouse are able to service students best, right? And linking them up with the resources and providing them with the supports that they need.
I don't want to leave anybody out, so we're talking about counselors,
Schools,
psychologists, social workers, and PPWs who deal with high levels of attendance issues with their kids.
Yep.
So now let's go on to our last priority, priority 5, which is building and sustaining our future. So walk us through this one in the last 3 minutes that we have.
Yeah. So talk about instructional data division. This was data that is not normally one that I have my fingertips on. So we, what you may not know is we have a comprehensive maintenance plan where we get scored on individual areas. You'll see the 3 that are reported on the scorecard. They have specific thresholds for success. That's what we're aiming towards. So we want kids inside the buildings that they're in to feel like the buildings are meeting the needs, right? And that are maintained and cared for deeply. We also have goal 2 in that one, which is about students accessing devices as well as some of the instructional tools that we use, our learning management system. And last but not least in this one, we have some funding, right? Yeah. We have specific thresholds that are set to us by Blueprint. And so looking at the percentage of schools that are spending according to the kind of proclamations from Blueprint and then making sure that we're in compliance with that. So kind of a different world than we hear a lot about in education. However, reflective of who and where we serve.
So we're talking about the buildings, we're talking about the classrooms, and we're talking about how we use the funding that we receive through the state, through Blueprint categories to actually support those students who are in those particular buildings and facilities and classrooms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
To do this.
We've learned a lot, so we can see the scorecard. We have a great website that Ms. Harding has set up. Talk us about that website real quick.
Yeah.
And put the URL.
Yep. So at aacps.org/strategic plan, the website is in native text, and so that means if English is not your native language, we can translate it to what you need. You'll see the visualizations of all the graphical representations that are seen both on the PDF version of the scorecard, which is printable, as well as on the website. We're looking forward to building that out more and more and updating it as data continues to trickle in throughout the year, and excited to kind of have this layer of transparency between us and the community.
And that leads me to one more quick question. So the data that we have up now is the data from this past spring?
Yeah, the majority of the metrics are using 23-24 as sort of a baseline. Some of it is even fall of 24. And then as more data comes in, we'll update that, and you'll really see the build and the trend over the 5 years. We very intentionally used 23-24 as the baseline because it wasn't really initiated yet as a strategic plan. So we wanted to track the work of this strategic plan these 5 years. And so that's the data you'll see reflected.
So I want to thank you again for spending some time with us today, Mrs. Harding. So join us next time on Forward Focus.